Eagle fans, EaglefanKarl. This is going to be my reaction video to that tough divisional loss against the Saints. And, I've started doing this the last year of Chip Kelly, so this is the first time I've ever had to do a reaction video to an Eagles playoff loss. Obviously got the benefit of doing all the reactions to the playoff wins last year, and even the first game of this playoff season. This is the first time, and these playoff losses, they're tough. There's just no way to get around it. They're tough losses. And, I had said before the game, and looking back on it, maybe this isn't the case. But at the time you're in it, I said, I'd rather us lose a blowout than lose a close game because they're just tougher to lose. Looking back on it now, I'm glad the Eagles gave them a really good game. Certainly better game than anybody thought they were going to give them. If you look at it this way, all four home teams won yesterday, so all the underdogs lost. But the Eagles are the only underdog that actually covered the spread. And they had the largest spread there. So they were the biggest underdogs, and yet they came the closest. They were the closest team to upsetting their opponent than any of the other teams that faced off in this past weekend's games. When you really look at it, then, tip of the cap to the Eagles for giving us a great season. Certainly, going into December, got a lot more out of this than I thought it was going to. But looking back at it from the beginning of the season, disappointing for where I thought the Eagles might end up this year. But the close losses are tougher. I gotta say that when the Saints missed that field goal at the end, and we got the ball back, I really thought that we were going to win the game. I had said in my preview video that if we had the ball down with a chance to score and take the lead, with under 5 minutes left, I was going to start playing the Magic Carpet Ride song. I did that, and it just wasn't enough, obviously, to get this game done. So I know there was a lot of Eagles fans out there. We all have our superstitions of things we do. I wore that Philly special shirt every game to watch every game that happened throughout that stretch run once Foles took over. But I got to say that it was, so you do all those little things, but at the end of the day, none of it was enough. And this team came close, but they came up short. And unlike playoff wins, with playoff losses, I am going to look at some studs of the game because there were some guys out there that I think really played well and really played admirably and need to be acknowledged for it. And I thought of three guys specifically that I thought needed some recognition. Number 3 was Fletcher Cox. Obviously, he had some injury issues and he was not playing the whole game. But when he was out there, he was making a difference. And I think it really showed when he was out there. He was making plays, causing havoc. And when he was out of the game, it showed as well, unfortunately, to the benefit of the Saints. My number 2 stud is going to be Malcolm Jenkins. And he's really the heartbeat of that team. And, I really was impressed by the way he showed up and I think really played well. They kind of did with him what I thought they were going to do, which was matching him up really on Kamara out of the backfield. He's done that job very well for us in the past, lining up against a running back that's a really good receiving threat. And really, I think he did a good job at that. And if you look at across the board, the defense held the Saints to 20 points. And I'm going to get a little bit more into Jim Schwartz in a moment. But they held the Saints to 20 points. And if you had said before the game that we were going to hold the Saints to 20 points going into the game, I think we all would have taken it. So a lot of credit to the Eagles defense for what they did to make that happen. And Malcolm Jenkins is a large part of that. And my number 1 stud is going to be Cre'Von LeBlanc. He comes up with the big interception right at the beginning of the game. I think sets a tone that lets the Saints know, hey, listen, this isn't the same secondary you went up against back in November when you were able to torch us for 48 points. That wasn't going to happen in this game. And the defense really, I think, showed up. LeBlanc showed it on that play, and he was all over the field making plays throughout that game. So, a guy that probably Eagles fans didn't even know who he was 2 months ago ends up playing a huge role in this game and ends up, I think, really being one of the stars of the game for us. Once again, great game and a huge pick to start off that game and really get us started off on the right foot in that respect. But obviously with a loss, there's plenty of blame to go around in this thing. And despite the fact that, I think the Saints, if you look at it on its total, especially with all the injuries we have, the Saints were the better team in this game. But all in all, I think you've really got to look at a lot of the different things that we did that sort of we shot ourselves in the foot. And I did come up with three guys that I specifically want to call out for, duds of the game. And there's a lot of guys that, first off, I want to say, you're not going to see Alshon Jeffrey on this list for a couple of reasons. Number one, up until that last play, when the ball goes through his hands and it leads to the interception that seals the game, up until that play, Alshon Jeffrey was on my studs list. He was the one guy on offense that I thought was far and above the best player on the field for us on offense. And, for that reason, I was going to give Alshon Jeffrey a stud of the game. So for me, that play takes him off the studs list, but it's not enough to undo everything he did early in the game to put him on the duds list. So I'm not going to put Alshon Jeffrey on the duds list. But my number 3 dud is a guy that during the game, I thought for sure I was going to make him the first, second, and third dud of the game. But thinking back on it and reflecting back on it, I decided to actually drop him down to third place and put 2 other guys up in the first and second spot, and that's Jim Schwartz. Jim Schwartz, I've been critical of him all year, and he did some things in this game that really sort of bugged me. And it really comes down to just his stubbornness. So first of all, it's just his lack of wanting to put any pressure beyond his 4 down linemen, especially when you're up against a veteran like Drew Brees. Drew Brees doesn't have a lot of mobility. Get pressure in his face right away. And occasionally, is he going to burn you on something like that? Yeah, he's going to. But all in all, I think you can still sort of, get in his face and make him sometimes make a bad decision or have to throw the ball away because he doesn't have enough time. So I think added pressure against someone like Drew Brees is just needed. And, Jim Schwartz still stubbornly refused to do that. The other stubbornness is sometimes on the zone defenses he calls, and I am not a fan of zone defense against a quarterback like Drew Brees. Veteran quarterbacks are going to eat a zone defense alive. They know where the soft spots are. They're going to look for their receivers to get to those spots, and they're going to deliver the ball where it needs to be. And receivers that have been around enough with veteran quarterbacks like Drew Brees, the quarterback's going to tell him, listen, when you get to this spot, just sit down, I'll hit you, because that's where it's going to be open. They don't have to worry about defenders running with the receiver to break up those kind of passes. If you're in a zone, you just sit down and the ball's going to be delivered to you, and it's easy pitch and catch. And he continues to do that. On the first touchdown they had when they were down in short yardage situation, why you're running a zone defense in that situation, I don't know why. And what ends up happening is the wide receiver gets passed off to the outside guy, and Drew Brees burns him. And so that sort of irks me. Some of the zone defenses he uses on 3rd and longs are terrible. What I would prefer to say, if you don't want to bring the extra pressure, this is what I say about Schwartz's defense. If you're not going to bring the extra pressure and blitz, okay, fine. But why don't you run a man underneath with a zone over the top to sort of give some protection against the deep ball? That's what I think was called for yesterday. You're going up against a veteran quarterback who you're worried about is going to beat you with the long ball. So play man across the board and play 2 safeties high or 1 safety high to sort of protect for that long ball type of a situation. But, trust your guys to make some plays underneath, and I think that could have happened. And there was a couple times where we're in 3rd and long and they're playing that soft zone, he completes it, and then the receiver gets the yardage needed. If you're playing that sort of a defense, you've got to make those tackles, but they were too far off the receivers to get to them to do that. So it's just, once again, I think terrible design defense against that kind of an offense and against that kind of a quarterback. That kind of stuff might work when you're going up against the Mitch Trubisky's of the world. It's not going to work when you're going up against the Drew Breeses of the world. The other problem I have is when they do play man defense, the way he sticks to his sort of side of the field, slot corner guys, lining up with whoever lines up in those spots on the offense and not matching up a guy on a guy. So, for instance, taking someone like Cre'Von LeBlanc or Rasul Douglas, one of your guys who's playing better in the secondary, and matching him up against a Michael Thomas, rather than having Josh Hawkins line up against Michael Thomas on a 3rd and long, which obviously then is going to get completed for a first down. Those kind of plays are just dumb on the part of how you're designing your defense, and you're inviting the offense to say, okay, we know they're not going to change their coverages. They're going to keep Hawkins in the slot, so if we line Thomas up in the slot, that's the matchup we're going to get, and we're going to take advantage of that. That's just stupid, because you basically are letting the offense pick how they want to beat you. So for that reason, those kind of things just drive me nuts. All that said, like I said earlier in the video, you've got a team that averages 35 points at home and, over 30 points a game in total, even home and on the road, and you held them to 20 points. And their defense averaged giving up 22 points a game. So if you would have just hit what their defense averaged giving up, you would have won the game. So a lot of criticism goes to Jim Schwartz, but a lot of it's got to go to the offense, and that's going to be the reason why these top two guys are going to land on my duds list. Number 2 is going to be Nick Foles, and I know we've had a lot of love for Nick Foles. Nick Foles really saved this season with how he played down the stretch, but he had a great first quarter, and he was terrible quarters 2 through 4. I'm sorry, he was. If you look at the stats, he's 8 for 9 in the first quarter, and he throws for 113 yards and the 1 touchdown. After that, he goes 10 for 22 for 88 yards and 2 picks. So his numbers are better in the first quarter than they are for the rest of the game in terms of yardage, which is insane. The fact that you outthrew yourself in the first quarter, after the first quarter, you had over half your passing yards that you were going to get for that game. And some of that was on Doug and the way he was calling plays, I think. But a lot of it had to do with the fact Foles was just missing guys. And there was plays where he had guys that were there and they were missed. And this is the kind of thing that if Carson Wentz had had this kind of game, Eagles fans would have been all over him. And I know we have a lot of love for Nick Foles and what he did for us, but you can't be hypocritical in these kind of situations. Foles played terribly in quarters 2 through 4. I'm sorry, he just did. And he started to do a little bit maybe to get himself back, but then of course Jeffrey has the bad play at the end that ends the game. But if Foles had been playing well up through that point, that would not have happened. And there was, like I said, there was guys that were open that he was just missing, and that's just unfortunate. And I think in many respects, Foles sort of regressed back to what he normally is, which is a really, really good backup quarterback, if not good enough to be a starting quarterback in this league. But unfortunately, I just don't think he's at the elite level that a franchise quarterback is going to be that you're going to need to have. He has great runs where he can look really hot, and he's shown that to us. But at the end of the day, he's not a guy who's going to be able to do it, I don't think, over the course of a season. And unfortunately, that's what you need in the NFL, is a guy that can do that. I think I've got to criticize Nick Foles for is that first interception. That first interception, I think, just completely changed that game. It was a momentum killer. We were up 14-0 at the time. We really had the ability to sort of put the game away. And that was one of those passes where he was just off on his target. Zach Ertz had his guy beat. If he makes the right pass and he gets enough on that, then Ertz is able to get a big gain on that. He might not have gotten in the end zone, given the fact that he's going up against Lattimore, and Lattimore's got better speed. He's probably going to catch him. But it's certainly going to put you down in field goal range and easy, in close to where you're going to be able to think about scoring a touchdown, so that you're going to be able to put more points on the board. And that would have continued to put more and more pressure on the Saints as that game would have been going on early in that game. He underthrows that ball, and it's just a bad throw. And that's in that situation, you just can't do that. You can't make that kind of a throw in that kind of a situation because, like I said, I think it was a momentum killer, and I think it really sort of had a huge impact on the way this game went down. But of course, leading a lot to the problems that Foles was having was just the play design, the play calls, and for that reason, my number 1 dud is going to be Doug Peterson. And Doug Peterson, I think, coached a great season towards the end. I think he really sort of, started getting a little more innovative, but he got a little predictable, I think, in this game. He abandoned the run a little bit. He also, some of his passing plays were not adjusting to what the defense was doing. The defense started playing much more aggressive in sort of, press coverage and that kind of stuff. And in those sort of instances, you need to do more to try and free up your guys by running routes that are going to sort of create some natural picks and stuff like that. Some of those types of plays, some misdirection kind of plays, and he wasn't calling that. A play he calls in the first quarter, I think, which really goes, sort of understates this, is he calls a designed run to Nelson Agholor, which goes for a decent gain, and then he never comes back and tries anything like that again later in the game, and that was clearly something that could work. You've got to use it sparingly. You can't use it all the time. But the fact that it works and then you never try and go back to it again when your offense is struggling, I think suggests something. And that is that he just wasn't, I don't think, on top of his game as it related to, calling plays. So there was lots of times where I think Doug Peterson has shown with his play design that he can be really innovative, but there's been times where he's also been very predictable, and I think he got away a little bit from some of the more innovative stuff he did in this game, and it just was unfortunate that it came at the time it did. One final criticism that I know it's hindsight, but at the time it happened, I said that I thought they should accept the penalty that would have made it 3rd and 11 rather than 4th and less than 1, because to Doug Peterson's credit, I think he's really changed the way the league looks at 4th and less than 1 yard. I think teams are much more willing to go for it, even in their own territory, than they were before Doug Peterson. And Doug Peterson, I think, showed that being aggressive in those kind of situations can really pay dividends. As a result, he's changed, I think, the way the league sees that. I even texted my cousins during one of the games, during this past weekend, and I even made that remark because there was a time where someone went for it on 4th and short that I don't think anyone ever would have dreamed of going for it a year ago. But because of what Doug Peterson did last year in the postseason, I think he showed coaches, listen, in these kind of situations, you've got to be aggressive and you've got to go for it. So given the fact that that's where the league has gone, and Sean Payton is not someone that's going to, I think, go away from something like that, especially when he has a guy like Drew Brees who's willing to send on those quarterback sneaks that he does also well. I was surprised they just didn't flat out go for it. Instead, they go with the fake punt, though. And, you had to be aware for that. And as a result, like I said, hindsight's 20/20. But at the time I said, not that anybody was listening, but I said I would have accepted the penalty. And I know all the pundits were saying no one can fault him for not accepting the penalty. I can. I think he should have accepted the penalty, make them make a 3rd and long, or at least make another 10-yard completion to get it to 4th and short. If you even give up an 8 or 9-yard completion, I don't think they're going to try that on 4th and 2 or 3. Make at least a 10-yard gain on your defense, and at that point, the defense had still been playing well. And, so I think that, like I said, hindsight 20/20, but I would have accepted that penalty and make them make a play against me on 3rd down. Thoughts? So let me know what you think. Are there any studs or duds that you think I missed? Am I being too hard on Doug and Nick? Am I being too easy on Jim Schwartz, or shouldn't I include Jim Schwartz at all if they're holding the Saints to 20 points? Let me know in the comments below what you think. As we go through the rest of the playoffs, I'm going to be an Eagles fan that's going to be pulling for Andy Reid. Of the 4 teams left, I'm going to say go Chiefs. I hope that Andy pulls it off and gets that ring that's eluded him. I certainly hope he beats the Patriots. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and pull for Andy. And hey, at least for the next few weeks, for the next just under 3 weeks now, we are still the reigning Super Bowl champions. I know obviously we're not going to repeat at this point, but we can enjoy it for a few more weeks until someone wins the Super Bowl on February 3rd. We're still the reigning champs, and we can still say that proudly. It was a great run for the last year, and I want to thank you all for joining me as we went through this season. Like I said, I'll be checking in through the offseason. Don't know exactly when yet, but the Eagles have a lot of decisions they're going to have to make in this offseason. It's going to be an important one for the Eagles' future going forward. A lot of decisions to make at almost every position on the team. So I'm not sure when I'll check in again on those, but as Eagles make decisions, I might go ahead and check in and give you my thoughts. Until then, fly Eagles fly.